Aloha from Hawaii, where IAFOR is holding its annual conference on education, arts and humanities. I'm standing here with Dr. Hattori from the East-West Center. Thank you for being here. And could you briefly introduce yourself and tell us what it is that you do?
Sure. I'm Mary Hattori, originally from the island of Guam, and I work at the East-West Center. I am director of the Pacific Islands Development Program within the East-West Center. We advance the collective vision and goals of the Pacific Island peoples and nations.
And you gave a keynote presentation today.
Correct.
Could you tell us a little bit about what it was about?
Sure. The keynote was about some of the threats or challenges that we face and opportunities and actions that we can all take, and focusing on the actions that PIDP, our Pacific Islands Development Program, has taken to advance economic, social development in the Pacific Islands.
What will be some key takeaways that delegates have gotten from your presentation?
Key takeaways are that the priorities for Pacific peoples, which come through founding documents like the 2050 strategy for the Pacific, for the Blue Pacific continent, and the implementation plan, as well as the Pacific Leaders Gender Equality Declaration, include priorities like climate change. We understand that is the biggest threat that we all face, as well as gender equality and social inclusion and leadership development. So I talked a little bit about those three priorities and how we can work to advance solutions and actions that address those priorities.
In your keynote presentation, you mentioned some of the minorities that are living in the Pacific Islands, and the Pacific Islands have a huge indigenous community as compared to the U.S. migrants. What place does indigenous knowledge have and indigenous knowledge making have in the world?
As you said, in many of the Pacific Islands, the indigenous peoples are the majority. We are a minority in the state of Hawaii, which is part of the United States. So what it means is that the word indigenous actually isn't used much by the indigenous peoples of the Pacific Islands. So we talk about indigenous knowledge, we're really talking about our current, our ancestral knowledge. We have been in those islands for millennia. And in fact, my islands, the Mariana Islands, were settled by our first ancestors around the same time the Great Sphinx of Giza was being built. And so our cultures were there for millennia before any foreigners came. And so our indigenous knowledge is really the ancestral knowledge. We are the first stewards of the ocean and those islands. And so our knowledge is not only ancient, but we have thrived and we have been resilient for millennia. And so being of the land or of the ocean, in fact, for our islands, we identify as Tautautanu, people of the land, or Tautautasi, people of the ocean. We have ancestral knowledge, indigenous knowledge about that's sustainable, about the environment, and in terms of society and the evolution and development of prosperous societies. There's some research that shows that one of the most valuable and value-generating part of a society is not financial or material capital, but it's social capital. And that's what indigenous peoples of the Pacific have in abundance. And I think where we can apply what we know and our social capital, our relational expertise, if we can apply that or model it and be followed. In other words, people from other cultures can look at our models and adapt them and adopt them to address their own problems. I think that's a key to survival of our people and our planet.
In relation to that, there's some people it's their first time in Hawaii and their first time on a Pacific island. What can they take away back to their home countries that the Pacific Islands have to offer?
I think for visitors, the first thing to remember is that if you're a tourist or you're here for a short period of time, that places that are built specifically for tourists, hotels, Waikiki, tourist attractions, that's all very superficial, and it doesn't really tell you much about this place. We have tried to infuse Hawaiian culture into the tourist industry, but I would invite people to go outside of tourist spaces, go outside of Waikiki, outside of urban Honolulu, meet Native Hawaiians. There are many Native Hawaiian businesses you can support, there are many Native Hawaiian organizations, and there are many Native Hawaiian sites that can teach you more. So for example, there are taro patches, there are taro farms, there is a coconut farm, a coconut nursery. There are fish ponds, Native Hawaiian fish ponds that have been rebuilt. And so many of those sites welcome visitors, and they'll teach you about plant cultivation, the importance, the cultural aspects, the spiritual aspects of the land and what we cultivate on the land and ocean, as well as teach you things about the environment. So I think that, those are, I'd always encourage people to get outside of the normal tourist experience and meet the people and the cultures, experience the cultures and the people of this place.
How difficult is that to do when all the infrastructure here is helping tourists to just stay in one place, and because also of Hawaii is a very expensive place, I found it to be, and the activities that I wanted to do are way above my budget, and that is not really helping me learn the local culture.
Well, the good news is that the lesser visited attractions or the sites that are not tourist attractions are more affordable. The restaurants that are outside of the tourist hubs are more affordable. The mom and pop restaurants, and there's so many different cultures represented. There are Vietnamese families, there are Thai families, Filipino families, Mexican families. So you can get a diversity of food from these little restaurants and mom and pop food trucks at food courts that are much more affordable than the higher end restaurants within the tourist hubs. And then there are organizations, many Native Hawaiian organizations and long-standing organizations here that may not charge any admission at all or a very minimal admission. Places like the Manoa Heritage Center, which gives tours. There's a Hawaiian heiau, a Hawaiian, what some people would translate to temple on that site, and indigenous plants. There are places like Ho'olu'aina in Kalihi, which is a preserve, a nature preserve. A lot of places like that where there is minimal charge or none at all. And then the city and county of Honolulu has an extensive public park system, and you can go to the website and find out the times that the public parks are open, and then visit them, and they're all free.
I wish just information about it would be more readily available, but I hope this interview helps people discover those places. Going back to my previous question about the Pacific Islands and their knowledge and their place in the world in these uncertain political times, what is the place that the Pacific Islands can occupy? And do you see the Pacific Islands' role evolving into becoming more influential as issues such as climate change are becoming more pressing? Because one of the major issue in the Pacific Islands is climate change, and you're saying that Pacific Islanders have had sustainable practices for millennia. So do you see their role becoming more active in the future?
I do see the Pacific emerging as a force and as a major player, if you will, in geopolitics and in the world of environment. I see in areas of agriculture, including in areas such as sustainable tourism, ecotourism, right? The Pacific is stepping up. People are starting to recognize, people from outside the Pacific are starting to recognize that they can learn more from the Pacific. And so I think that as Pacific Islanders, we need to step up. And we're very humble people. Pride is a sin in many of the Pacific Islands, so we're not used to bragging about ourselves. But certainly if we're invited to share, there are many life-affirming values that can really benefit Western society, and our partners and allies, I think, would be better off and well served by inviting us to share our expertise, as opposed to taking the view that we need help from everyone else. I think the key to peace, harmonious living, living as a collective, supporting everyone, Pacific Islanders do that innately. It is part of our culture. And I see struggles in modern society in America and in parts of the West, right? There are so many struggles with things like homelessness and belonging, identity, right? A lot of the solutions can be found in the Pacific.
That is one big theme that we have been discussing at IAFOR throughout the year, actually, in a lot of, it's not controversial perspectives, but it's a call, if you will, from our IAFOR community for the global north to accept voices from the global south. But that is very difficult to do, because that means that the global north has to seize some of its power and confer it upon the global south, and whether they are ready to do that is questionable. It's a thing of power, and I don't think the global north is ready to do that, so it's a difficult task.
It's a difficult task, and I think it requires a certain level of cultural humility, and humility in general. But I think if the global north is going to survive, it needs to, any society that wants to survive must rely on external relationships. We saw that in the pandemic. Countries, no matter where they're from on the globe, the countries with the most diverse relationships survived and weathered the pandemic better than those that were very insular and had very few meaningful relationships.
Well, I hope that next time I come back to Hawaii, that there will be some changes, and seeing Hawaii and the Pacific Islands more on the news even. And I hope that everything you do with your center also has some effect in the world.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here.